Hi, this is Keith from Kentucky, but for a few months back in 2021, I also went by the name Buddy the Elf on stage, and you're listening to Scandal Water,
where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1. Stories and scandal water. It's where you need to be. Stories and scandal water. Let's pour you a cup of tea.
Hello, Ashley.
hello.
We are back to record another holiday episode. Love these. This one's so fun.
And this one comes out on Christmas Eve.
That's right. That's right.
It does.
What do you want to share with them who just did the little shout out for us?
That was our friend Keith, who played Buddy the Elf in our 2021 version of Elf. And Brian was actually one of the directors, and our friend Olivia was the other director.
So very cool that he did that
Yes.
for us.
Yes.
And I think that was a really great segue because you all, I'm sure, have figured out by now that Elf is the focus of this episode. The much beloved 2003 movie.
I can't believe it was 2003.
It's been a long time.
Whew.
I know. So I thought I would start with a game, Ashley, a little quiz for you. I'm calling this, How Well Do You Know Elf?
Oh dear, okay.
Right? Okay, number 1. Name 2 other Christmas movies that are given a nod in the movie Elf.
2 other Christmas movies that are given a nod. A Christmas Story.
Yes, yes.
Because of the department store scene, yes?
Yes, but actually also there's a snowball fight that's reminiscent of that.
Yeah. And remind me, there's some Gimbals is used in some way,
Yes,
which was the
yes.
rival department store to Macy's for Miracle on 34th Street. So is that
That absolutely.
Okay.
You got it. A couple of the other answers you might have given. It's a Wonderful Life, bridge scene,
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
Rudolph. We're going to talk a whole lot more about Rudolph, all
Rudolph.
right? Do you recall what causes Elf, Buddy the Elf, to utter his famous line, son of a nutcracker?
No, what happens?
He's hit with a snowball.
Okay.
Okay, when Buddy realizes someone is dressed as Santa inside the department store, what does he say to the so-called fake Santa?
You sit on the throne of lies.
Yes, I knew you would know that one. Okay, now this one nobody would know,
Okay.
but it'll be fun for you to guess.
Okay.
Name 3 toppings that Buddy puts on his spaghetti meal.
It's syrup, and more syrup, right? Syrup or like sprinkles, and I don't know. I think
Yes.
it's like the 4 food groups, which is syrup is one of the major food groups.
Yes, I actually went and looked this scene up
Okay.
just so I could check myself. Definitely a lot of maple syrup. There's also chocolate syrup. I saw broken up Pop-Tarts, M&Ms, little marshmallows like you see in cereal, and snow caps. Phew, I know. I may have missed something, but those are the ones that I definitively noticed.
That's disgusting.
All right, last one. What is the name of Buddy and Jovi's baby who is seen briefly at the end of the movie? Now, you're not going to get this, but I wanted to ask because I did not realize it was meaningful. And it
Aw.
is. Yeah.
Bob.
Susie. And you know
Susie.
why? His mom's name was Susan Wells.
Aw.
And I had never, as many times as I have seen that movie, I had not picked up on that.
I was thinking Bob Newhart, the
Right, right. No,
No, that's sweet.
I thought that was lovely. I'm like, I've seen this movie 20 times easily. Never got it.
Aw.
I know. I thought that'd be a fun way to start and a nice little segue into our topic. Just to remind you guys, we mentioned this last week, but this topic actually came from our listeners. We have a private Facebook group called Armchairs and Tea, which we would love to have you join.
Absolutely.
Go on over there and just put in a request and we'll let you in. But we put a poll out there asking what people would be interested to hear about. And Elf was one of our 2 winning topics. The last one was last week. We did some of the notable must-have and highly in-demand toys that caused crazes over the years.
Yep.
If you haven't heard that one, go back and check it out because
It
it's
was
very
wild.
fun.
It was wild.
Yeah. But this one is Elf. And one of the reasons Elf has been in the media more over the past few months is because of a certain actor who has been brought in to play Santa through the Christmas season in Elf the Musical on Broadway.
I love this man. I want nothing but the best for him and whatever he does.
I know. So I'm letting you say his name because I knew you'd want to.
Sean Astin.
Sean Astin. And I bet you hadn't put this together, but I know this is going to excite you.
What?
We are recording this, guys, on a Saturday. Very unusual to us.
Yes.
Our schedules were tough.
Yes.
And so we are here on Saturday, November 9th, and this is
this
the
opening night?
He makes his Broadway
gosh, I got
debut
goosebumps.
in Elf the Musical
Tonight?
Oh,
Sean, this is in the future, but I wish you nothing. I hope everyone stands and applauds as soon as you walk on stage. I will do it right now. Yes, Sean! Yes!
I knew you would.
Oh my gosh.
I was so excited when I saw that. I
love
was
that.
like, yeah.
He's going to be
Santa.
fantastic.
Well,
Standing ovation.
According to a People article, quote, the Oscar-nominated actor, known for roles in The Goonies, Rudy, Lord of the Rings, 50 First Dates, and Stranger Things.
I mean, just give him the Oscar. Everybody just stop. Stop this. Oscar nominated, not Oscar winner. Let me run your campaign, John.
That's
Next
right.
role, whatever it is.
She's throwing her
doing
hat
it.
in the ring. All right.
Yes.
To finish the quote.
Sorry.
He will make his Broadway debut in the production, a milestone that comes after 4 decades in the business. He steps into the role originated by Ed Asner on screen and by George Wendt in the original Broadway production.
Lovely.
Didn't know that. Yeah,
I didn't know that either.
So there's been a lot of excitement surrounding this show, not only because Sean Astin is in it, but also because it's the first time the show will be playing in New York City in over a decade, which I did not realize.
I think that I can give you a little insight into this. So this is why we were able to perform it. I remember when we selected this for TTD for the season that we did, they said, and they're kind of going back to what we talked about last time, supply and demand, they said, if you want to perform Elf, because we had been trying for years and it was restricted because it was on Broadway. And they are like 10 years before, And then they said, if you want to do this, it's closing down. You can't do it after 2021 is what they had originally said. Now, I think because of the pandemic, they extended it to maybe 2022 or maybe even 2023. But they said definitively it will not be allowed to be licensed after this time, which made everybody go, okay, it's going back on Broadway.
That's right.
Because something you may not know is if a play is playing on Broadway, community theaters, regional theaters usually cannot perform it at the same time because they want you to go to Broadway.
Right. Well, that's some interesting background there. Well, not only has it been so long, though, the website has a huge notice in all caps that reads, strictly limited holiday engagement, November 9th through January 4th only. So it looks like this is it. I mean, talk about supply and demand.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Yeah, right. But still, I would think, even after the holidays, I would think some people would still go see it because of who's in it. But it makes sense. You're going to stop it after that date. Now, I have not seen him, but apparently a very talented actor. They refer to him as Tony nominee. Gray Henson plays Buddy. And Kayla Davio, who apparently, I have not seen her either, but she gained a lot of attention for her Broadway performances in Waitress and Tina, is the one who plays Jovi. So it sounds to me like it's a pretty amazing cast. And of course, as we've already said, Sean Astin plays Santa. Here's his bio from the official Elf the Musical on Broadway website. Sean Astin is thrilled to be making his Broadway debut. Astin is known for classic characters: Samwise Gamgee in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Rudy in Rudy, Mikey Walsh in Spielberg's The Goonies, Doug Whitmore in 50 First Dates, Bob Newby in Netflix's Stranger Things, and most recently, Tyler on ABC's The Connors.
I did not know that. I now need to tune into this show.
You're going to go check it out.
I am.
Astin is the son of luminary performers Patty Duke and Jon Astin. Sean dedicates his performance to his Mrs. Claus, Christine Astin, for 32 holly jolly Christmases, his daughters Allie, Elizabeth, and Bella, and his longtime team of elves at Stewart Talent and Luber Rockland.
Oh,
I know.
he's so sweet. He does the best speeches, even in print.
So I wanted to start with just a little bit about that because number one, I think that's why you've been so excited about it.
Yes.
And number two, that's why it's been in the news so much. But the rest of this episode is going to be dedicated to the movie.
Okay, that's
right?
fine. That's totally fine. As long as we all acknowledge that Sean Astin is the absolute best and we give him a standing ovation at some point today. When you're listening to this, just stand and clap. That's all I want.
So you've given a little bit of your background with Elf. You
Yeah.
talked about doing the musical. Do you have
I
any?
did not. No, just to clarify, I was not involved in it. This was actually, in the history of TTD, it was the first show in our history that I took a break. And I was just an audience
You just got to
member.
enjoy it.
I did just get to enjoy it.
Oh,
Yeah. It was
nice,
really, really nice.
You may have other background you want to share, like with the movie, but I will say, I think I've talked about this before. Elf is one of those family Christmas movies for my family. I have seen it. I think I said this just a few minutes ago. I'm positive I've seen it more than 20 times. It's just one of those standard movies we turn to every holiday season. And I mean, it's just joyful. You know, it's just so lighthearted and fun. It's also one of the movies that you can show in a school if there's
Yeah,
a
true.
reward, you know, like some kind of an event for the kids. It's one that I have a long history with, and there's a lot of sentimentality, I would
love
say. Yeah. Did you watch the movie a lot?
No, it's not one of the ones that I watched frequently because it came out when I was in my early 20s. And as we talked about before, I am a super old soul. So I was not tuning into new Christmas stuff. I'm more of a like what I saw in my childhood. That's what I continued to watch. But I have seen it several times and enjoyed it. And you're right. It's like very light and much like the syrup and waffles or whatever he eats. It's just very light and fluffy. And I don't think that anybody else could have played Buddy the Elf other than Will Ferrell because he was so ridiculous, but he was also committed and he played it sincerely.
Yeah. That point that you just made comes up a lot when other people like involved with the castmates or directors, that type of thing, they think very similarly to you.
Oh, okay.
We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But I agree with you 100%. Just to kind of start at the beginning, I feel like everybody's probably seen this, but just in case, here is a brief summary from People magazine. The film, starring Will Ferrell and Zooey Deschanel, was first released on November 7th, 2003, and has become a holiday classic in the years since. The movie centers around the hilarious antics of Ferrell's character, Buddy, a human raised by Santa's elves who sets out to find his biological father in the real world. I thought that was a pretty succinct, little summary. Now, I loved this because I felt like I knew this movie so well. And then when I started researching, I found out so much of the background that I had no idea was hiding under the surface. And it's good.
Okay.
I think you're going to be an even bigger fan by the time of this episode ends. So I think I've mentioned this before several times now, but Netflix has a series from several years ago called The Movies That Made Us.
Yes.
And they do have one episode centered around Elf.
Okay.
And I learned some good things in that. And then, of course, I also used many other sources. But in this Netflix series, they had David Berenbaum, the screenwriter behind Elf, talking about how it all occurred. And I thought this was so interesting. So he shared that while he is Jewish, he has always loved the Christmas season. He loves the holiday spirit, you know, the idea of presents. He especially always loved, from the time he was little, Christmas movies. So when he moved to Los Angeles from Philadelphia in 1993, he realized how much he missed everything about Christmas, like the snow
and cold weather.
Yes, and the feel of Christmas in his hometown. He was also in a new place, still feeling kind of, you know, out of sorts, not, you know. So he was very nostalgic, feeling kind of left out, and he spent his Christmas season in LA watching a lot of Christmas movies. And it was when he was watching one of his favorites, Rudolph, that he suddenly had an idea. He said because he could relate to this feeling a bit himself, he kind of made that observation that Rudolph is a misfit who doesn't fit in. And so in this movie, what he's about is setting out on a journey to find out where he does belong. And David suddenly realized, you know what? It would make a really great story if I took that exact same premise, but I substituted a giant elf for Rudolph.
Well, a human instead of an elf.
But there was something else about his script idea that was even more personal for David. Here is him speaking about this very briefly in The Movies That Made Us.
One of the hallmarks of a Christmas movie is that it has to have a big, big heart.
So for Elf,
The emotional journey of Elf was always a father and son story.
which to David was, well, very close to heart.
Well, my father passed away when I was younger, so the emotional drive of the film is searching for the father. And I knew telling the story, Dad, I love you, that I could connect to it on that level. And I knew that's what the journey that I wanted Buddy to go on.
I thought that was sad, first of
Yeah.
all, but also it's funny because when I think of Elf, I mean, obviously the search for his father and that connection is a huge part of it. But a lot of times if you kind of zoom out from a surface level, you get caught up in the silliness of it.
Yes.
But it's the heart of it.
It
It's
is-
so important.
It's probably part of the reason why it's so successful is it does have that serious heart to the
Yeah.
core of the story.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I thought it was very interesting. So what happened was David found an interested studio who optioned his script for a year, but they wanted to cast Chris Farley, who David did not feel was right for Buddy the Elf. So he let the time lapse on that option so that he could opt out of the contract. And although this is interesting, he did not mention it, David, in this series, but several other articles said that at the same time, one of the other actors that they were pushing for the role of Buddy was Jim Carrey. So I am assuming that David also did not love that idea. Well, David, who, again, he's basically kind of a newbie writer. He
Yeah.
doesn't really have anything on his resume. He ends up having a meeting with a producer named John Berg, who is actually also another newbie. He doesn't really have anything on his track record either. But this producer, John Berg, he does love the script. And he brings in his partner, another producer, Todd Komarnicki. None of these guys are big names.
Yeah.
But the one thing that these two producers brought that was valuable to the table was their suggestion to cast Will Ferrell as Buddy the Elf. They felt like this role called for somebody who could play Buddy with
And he
almost...
needs to be tall.
Well, and it's funny, I don't know that they ever thought about his
But
height.
he just needs to be larger. Like with Chris Farley, Jim Carrey would have been tall, but Chris Farley, maybe I'm wrong. I don't imagine him as a tall, you know what I mean?
Well, but you know what? A lot of that was special effects.
True.
Yeah, well, they were really tuned into his childlike innocence. They had seen him do a lot of sketches on SNL where he could kind of pull off this naive or innocent, almost kind of, I don't know, not super sharp type character. And they thought, you know, this would serve well in this role. And John, one of those producers, basically promised David, the writer, that he could get Will to sign on, which he did through a connection he had. He played basketball with one of Will Ferrell's agent, what kind of a low-level person on the team, right? So he talks to this guy, pitches the movie to him, shares the script. This agent likes it, but he's not the one who makes the decision. So he kicks it up the chain. It goes through 3 or 4 people till finally it gets to somebody who gets it to Will. And Will reads it and agrees
He loves
he
it.
would be willing to do it. So now they had producers, they had a star attached to it, they had a great script, they did not have a studio. So they started making the rounds and they were told no time after time after time. And they were also told Will Ferrell is a terrible choice. We do not believe in him as the star of this movie. Because at the time that this is all happening, he really only had one big starring role, which was Night at the Roxbury to his name,
yeah.
and it had not done well.
And it's not the type, they're like, this is not the same genre.
Yeah, yeah. So then this team comes in contact with a representative from New Line Cinema who happened to love Will Ferrell, and they agreed to option the script. But the movie was still not greenlit. They needed a director. One of them was a friend to Vince Vaughn, and it was Vince Vaughn who suggested they reach out to Jon Favreau, who at that time was known much more for his acting than for directing.
Who was in Rudy, which is a tie to Sean Astin.
Oh, that's true.
Hello.
Yeah. He only had one directing credit to his name
I knew
at
it was
that
one of his
point.
first things he had done.
Yeah. So this is where I thought it was super cool. In order to come on board, Jon Favreau came to this team and he shared his vision for the film, and he basically had 3 non-negotiables. And once he shared those non-negotiables with David and the team, they said, "You're our guy." They loved what he said. They got their green light. They got a budget of about $30 million, and they were ready to go. But I want to share with you what Jon's parameters were.
Good.
Number 1, he said it absolutely had to be a true family Christmas movie. Jon had lost his mother at a young age, and watching Christmas movies with his father was a very special memory for him. So if he was hired to direct the movie, he wanted this to be the kind of Christmas film that families could watch together.
I love it.
Yep. And hopefully year after year. And he was very big into family. In fact, just as a side note, his son, Max Favreau, played young Buddy in Elf. Yeah. Secondly, he wanted this movie to be a timeless Christmas classic. He was setting out from the get-go. I want this to be timeless. I want it to be a year after year type movie. And thirdly, he wanted to use Rankin Bass as a model.
Oh.
And he did not just mean visually.
Yeah.
I could not believe how much this comes into play. Let me share a little bit about this with you. Speaking to Rolling Stone back in 2020, Jon Favreau said that, first of all, when he first got the script, it was a much darker version of the film. Those are his words. Mm-hmm. Because of this, even before he'd been given the job of director, he had himself started reworking the script to soften it. He said, if I made the world that he was from, meaning Buddy, if I made the world that he was from as though he grew up as an elf in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, one of those Rankin Bass Christmas specials I grew up with, then everything fell into place tonally. So for a year, I rewrote the script. It turned into more of a PG movie from a PG-13. He was a darker character in the script I had read originally. The character became a more innocent. The world became more of a pastiche of the Rankin Bass films. The studio read it and agreed to make it, and that's when I was brought in to direct.
Interesting.
That's
so
what
he was
said.
kind of brought in as a script doctor, it sounds like at first.
Well, I mean, it was kind of like he said, if I'm going to direct this, here's the version I'm willing to do.
Interesting.
And they liked it. The decision to model it after Rankin Bass also affected their special effects, as we've just said. In order to achieve that look, Jon Favreau again told Rolling Stone he did not want to make this film a big CGI extravaganza. He wanted to use practical sets and manual animation. In fact, he has said that the only CGI in the film is some snowing. He told the magazine, I like motion control, models, matte paintings. It feels timeless. And stop motion is my favorite. There were a lot of challenges to do that stuff in stop motion. I had to fight very hard not to do that stuff in CGI. So for the stop motion parts where you see some of those animated characters like Leon the Snowman and the Narwhal, they hired a company run by 3 brothers. They did the stop motion parts of the movie. And then to make Buddy appear larger than everyone else, they used something called forced
perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lord of the Rings used that too.
Okay. So do you want to explain what it is?
Well, I don't know if I'm schooled enough to tell you, but I think it just, you place the person that is needing to be larger toward the front of the frame and the person that needs to be smaller toward the back. So they're not actually standing next to each other. They're further apart. I think that's right. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you've got the right idea.
Okay.
Yeah. And it sometimes actually would even require making 2 different sets because you're right. But he said they did that for all their shots of the North Pole. And he says, in terms of doing 2 different sets, he says, if you can look closely in some of those scenes, you can see where the 2 sets meet because they did not use CGI to paint over or blur it. He said he even wanted to have the same flaws that it would have had before CGI because, again, he wanted it to look like Rankin Bass. He wanted it more timeless. Another way he used forced perspective was they wanted Will Ferrell like to tower over Papa Elf, for example. So they would shoot scenes with Bob Newhart standing a few feet behind Will Ferrell to give the impression that he was half the size of, Buddy. And there's a famous scene early in the movie where Buddy sits on Papa Elf's lap as, right? So what they did was they had Bob Newhart sitting about 10 feet back in a chair, and then they had a child in the chair. Will Ferrell sits on the child's leg. You see a child's legs coming out from under Will Ferrell.
Poor child.
Well, they kind of laughed about that. They said, Bob Newhart said, poor kid, I hope he's okay. Yeah, he joked about it. But that's the kind of thing that they were doing. Some of the other aspects of the film that were inspired by Rankin Bass would include bringing in the characters like Leon the Snowman, who parallels Sam the Snowman. The costumes. If you do
That's
a comparison.
True. That is true.
Yes. 2 cute little side notes about the costumes. First of all, Jon Favreau said that Buddy's outfit was quite an attention getter, and the costume designer talked about how tricky it was to make him look silly, but never inappropriate.
Yes.
It was like they really needed him to look fun and innocent, right? So it was a fine line to get his outfit right. But Jon Favreau said when they were filming scenes in the city, all kinds of things would happen. So here's one little story he shared. When we had Will in the Lincoln Tunnel, the tunnel was open. Same thing with the 59th Street Bridge. Whenever he was out there in his suit, we'd hear screeches and fender benders and lights smashing. People would be looking at him walking on the side, and that would cause a few minor traffic accidents.
I bet it's because they kind of knew who he was, and the fact that he's in that outfit, they're like, what is going on?
Yes, absolutely. And another piece of trivia about that outfit is that in 2021, the elf costume worn by Will Ferrell sold at auction for $296,702.
Wow.
I know. Well, we haven't even talked about the cast yet.
I know.
So we're going to take a break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll get into that next.
It's time for an announcement. Okay, people. Tuesday morning at 12 a.m., new episodes of Scandal Water drop.
Scandal Water! Oh my gosh, Scandal Water! I know them. Candy and Ashley, I know them. I know them!
They'll be here to share another story from the entertainment world.
Yeah!
Just Google Scandal Water Podcast on your favorite podcast app or YouTube and hit subscribe. 12 a.m. Tuesday.
12 a.m. Tuesdays!
Scandal Water's dropping an episode.
Yes, I love Scandal Water.
Thanks, buddy. And we are back.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the cast. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. You guys may have noticed that the director himself does play a small role. Jon Favreau is Buddy's doctor in Elf, and he also is the one who does the voice of the narwhal.
Aw.
I know.
Buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Perfectly. It was John who wanted Bob Newhart to play
that.
Papa Elf, which everybody agrees was genius casting. Yeah.
He's just so funny. He reminds me of Nate Bargatze, you know, that just deadpan
Yes.
the delivery.
Yes, he's so funny. Yeah. But Bob has shared that it was a little challenging to play that role because of that forced perspective that we talked about earlier. You know, many times he's having to shoot his scene standing a few feet behind Will Ferrell in order to give the impression of the difference in their size, and it meant that they couldn't face each other.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, here's what Bob said about that. As an actor, it's tough because you don't have eye contact. He's looking one way, I'm looking the other. It is difficult when you're not playing to the other actor's face and his reaction.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, Jon Favreau was also the one who wanted Ed Asner to play Santa.
That's such a good casting.
Yes. Brilliant. We've already discussed the casting of Will Ferrell as Buddy the Elf, but just to elaborate on that for a second, several castmates echoed what you said earlier, that he was just perfect for the role. Nobody else could have done it the way he did. One of those people was Zooey Deschanel. Here's a quote from her. "This was Will's movie. He just has such a sweetness and innocence to him. He's able to always go to that place of innocence that allows a character like this to really come to life."
Yeah, you got to really commit to it. The fish out of water, because that's what he is. He's just looking for his place. You have to believe that. It's sort of like with Enchanted, when Giselle, I think was her name, when she is this princess out of time, you just have to be that wide-eyed innocent and just 100% commit to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, speaking of Zoe, according to Zoe herself, she was not the first choice for the role of Jovi. She is quoted as saying, "The person they cast couldn't do it. A lot of the parts I got early in my career, I was filling in for someone else who had dropped out last minute."
You're still in it.
I know, right?
It's still on your resume.
One of the two producers that we talked about earlier, John Berg, said the actress the studio really wanted was Katie Holmes, but Katie was not interested. So they auditioned a lot of other actresses, and of course, they ended up bringing Zoe on board. She was not a huge star before this film. I mean, again, this is 21 years ago.
Yeah.
Variety says about this that it was her breakout role. Like, this was her big break.
And she shows her good singing voice, too.
Absolutely. Yes. In 2020, she told Entertainment Weekly that the shower singing scene was written in after she was cast in the movie. She said, I remember Jon Favreau telling me they were catering it to whoever played the part. One actress they were looking at was good at skateboarding, but I had a cabaret act at the time and was performing a lot. They knew I was a singer, so they put that in to be my special thing that he could discover I was good at. And then other people have weighed in. The casting director, Susie Ferris, said that Zoe's innocence and vulnerability made her perfect for the character and noted that her voice was a tremendous help. They all love that. So a funny note is that she's actually a natural brunette.
Yes, she is a blonde in this movie.
Well, she wanted to be a brunette in this movie.
Why did they not let her?
Here's the thing. She says it's my own fault. She had auditioned as a blonde because she had been going for a different role, some other project. It had required that she be blonde. So she had dyed her hair because she wanted this other part, ends up auditioning for Elf while she's still blonde. When she gets the role, she says, I'm that's not my color. Can I be brunette? And they're like, no, we like you blonde. They would not let her change.
That's so wild. I think she looks better as a brunette. She was lovely in the film, but I just think her coloring is better for brunette.
I know. She's gorgeous. Well, she's gorgeous either way.
Yeah.
We all know James Caan played Walter Hobbs.
Yes.
He was not their first choice.
What?
Gary Shandling.
Gary Shandling?
Can you imagine?
No.
I don't think that fits. But Gary passed, and that led them to James Caan. James Caan had this reputation, right? He was known for being a very dramatic, tough guy kind of actor.
So he's kind of like Michael Caine in The Muppets.
But yes,
He's the
they thought
serious,
and they thought he
actor.
would. Yes, they thought this is a big name. We attach to it. He's going to bring some credibility. Everybody's going to love it.
Prestige.
Yes, but some of the filmmakers said they were a little scared of him because he had a reputation for being difficult, and he sometimes could be. Like one of the cameramen jokingly said he did not hesitate to tell him to get something out of his face, and he might have thrown in a bad word there. But yeah, so he could be a little, rough-edged at times, but for the most part, they said he was much easier to get along with than they expected. On the flip side, it was hysterical. They said that Will Ferrell, playing Buddy the Elf, actually annoyed the fire out of him in real life. That Will doing these scenes, like, for example, the tickle scene.
I bet that's not even acting for him. In other words, they're like, get off me.
Exactly. They said James Caan would just be like, we've got it, right? We don't have to do this again, right? I mean, they said that he annoyed him so much, which they all said worked perfectly.
Yeah, it does.
Like, it absolutely worked. Mary Steenburgen played Buddy's stepmom, and I thought she did a really good job.
She was really sweet.
Yeah, so accepting. She was one that I think her character, helped others.
She was the bridge.
Yeah, they helped them to really think about the meaning and the points behind what was happening. I don't know, like the values, I guess. But anyway, she talked briefly in different interviews about Will and how fun it was to work with him, how perfect he was, and also how hard it was not to laugh.
I bet.
Yeah. A cute side note. Wanda Sykes was the one supposed to play the department store manager, and she was in it until right at the last minute when she suddenly dropped out for whatever reason. They had to replace her with Faison Love, who was someone Jon Favreau knew, and he did a fabulous job. I think he's hysterical.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention, I've never seen this before, but his little name tag says Wanda. They already had her name tag made, and this actor who replaced her wanted to wear Wanda.
That's cute.
I know. I thought it was adorable. You've already said Peter Billingsley, who played Ralphie in 1983's A Christmas Story, plays Ming Ming, the head elf of Santa's workshop. I did not realize that was him.
Really?
I don't know how I missed that, but I hadn't put it together that was him. And Peter Dinklage was hysterical, playing the very unhappy children's author, Miles Finch. He did such a good job.
He did.
And the last note I will make in terms of casting is actually a voice note. Will Ferrell did not do his own burp.
Oh, gosh.
The burp was actually done by famous voice actor Maurice LaMarche, who is best known for his roles as the Brain in Animaniacs, which was the spinoff to Pinky and the Brain.
Oh, so he had his own show. How did I miss that?
I don't know, but that's what it said in the notes.
What are we going to do tonight, Brain? Same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Yes. Yes. Okay, let's talk about the setting.
Yes.
So obviously, New York City, very significant in the story. And when they filmed in New York City, they said, we wanted it to look real. And the best way to make it look real
Was to be there.
was for it to be real.
Yeah.
So they called it a guerrilla style of filming. They put Will Ferrell in his little elf outfit for the most part.
He's so brave.
They literally said that. They literally used that term. He was so brave to do everything they made him do.
Yeah.
But they took this small film crew and they would go to all these different locations. I think it was 13 days that they filmed at different places around New York City. As we've already said, they went to places like Lincoln Tunnel, a crowd scene on Park Avenue, all kinds of different places. And they did not hire extras.
Oh, those are just people?
They would just throw him into the middle of a situation.
Oh, my
They gave a
goodness.
very specific example. Here you go. If you go back into the movie, you
Yeah.
see the part where there's a man crossing the street and he's wearing all red and he's older. He has a white beard, white hair, and Will Ferrell runs up to him as Buddy the Elf and goes, "Santa!" And the man looks at him like he's crazy. That's just a normal man who was crossing the street.
How did they get permission to use that man's likeness?
Do not know.
Wow.
But they, for the most part, those were just people doing
Wow.
their thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about this before too, when I think it was during our Hallmark episode, that it's cheaper to film in Canada. So a lot of their interior shots
Is in
were
Canada.
filmed on a soundstage in Vancouver.
Yeah, that makes sense. Save money where you can.
Right. Well, initially, the department store where Buddy accidentally lands a job was supposed to be Macy's, but they could not use it because Macy's was willing to let them shoot there and use their Santa land and even incorporate their film into the Macy's parade.
Yeah.
But one of the stipulations was they could not do their fake Santa thing because remember, like Santa has to be real. So
Because as we learned in Miracle on 34th Street, Santa is real.
that's right. So they could not go with this whole plot point.
That
you
makes
know.
sense.
Right. So Jon Favreau said, quote, "We had to think long and hard about it. We ended up filming it in the cafeteria of a mental hospital in
my
Vancouver
goodness.
instead of Macy's because we had to build our own version of it because we were unwilling to change the content." He added that they ended up naming the store Gimbals as a nod to Miracle on 34th Street.
Interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of that Santa Land scene in which Buddy tells the Santa, played by Artie Lang, that he sits on a throne of lies after realizing he's not the real Santa, that little fight scene was filmed in one take.
Really?
Yeah. He said the actors were told they only had one shot to get it right because it took the movie's art department over 2 weeks to create that really crazy Lego cityscape with the light bright displays and all, the train, all that stuff. Jon Favreau said they had to smash the whole thing. So
it's gone.
Yeah.
It's
so we don't have resets. The actor who played Santa said, "We shot right up until we destroyed the place. So we had one take to destroy it." And Favreau says, "Just go nuts."
Wow.
But we got one take.
Wow.
Yeah. Zoe and Mary Steenburgen recalled that the day they filmed their grand finale scene, the one where the crowd gathers and they're trying to raise enough Christmas spirit to power Santa's sleigh, they said it was brutally cold that day. And they said that they had to do the scene over and over again. Mary said it was 3 a.m. I was tired, but I had the feeling I was in a scene that would stand the test of time. Yeah. We have just a couple more notes. We are bringing this to a close, but something I had not heard before was that they almost got shut down because they were too similar to Rankin and Bass's Rudolph. For a time, lawyers came in and were asking questions and following them around on set and evaluating every aspect of the film, and ultimately it worked out.
They passed it.
Yeah, they managed to get past that, and the movie came out. The response was amazing. By its second week, it was #1 at the box office. It became a huge critical and commercial success, grossing, well, depending on your source, either $220 million or $250 million worldwide. And obviously, it has become the timeless Christmas classic.
Which is what he wanted.
That was exactly. The popularity led to Elf the Musical, which was workshopped in 2009 and opened on Broadway in 2010. And skimming reviews, I mean, obviously I did not do a deep dive on this, but it seemed as though most people seem to agree that the musical version is charming, festive, fun, but maybe they're a little disappointed that a few things had to be cut because of adding all the musical numbers.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I saw as a pattern.
It's a different telling of the same class. There's some things that are the same, and some things, when you make it a musical, there's dialogue that has to be cut because you have to put a song in.
Right. Right. Well, with all this popularity, the question that comes up time and time again is, why have we never had a sequel? Why was there never another movie?
I would say the story is done, right? Or is there going to
Well,
be a
I mean,
sequel?
you know, you could say that about almost anything,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Here's what I found. In September of 2020, James Caan, remember, that's Buddy's father, Walter Hobbs, told the radio show The Fan in Cleveland that a sequel was never made because of an alleged disagreement between Will Ferrell and Jon Favreau.
Oh.
This is a quote from James Caan. We were going to do it, and I thought, oh my Lord, I finally have a franchise movie. I can make some money. Let my kids do what they want to do. However, this is still him talking, the director and Will didn't get along very well. Will wanted to do it, and he didn't want the director, and Favreau had it in his contract. It was one of those things.
Wow.
Now, on the flip side, in 2021, when he was asked about it, Will Ferrell said that he had turned down a second film because he thought that the premise was too similar to the original movie, and that if he was going to do it, he wanted it to be something really original and unique that would, stand on its own.
Yeah, I agree.
Armchair psychologist.
So that brings us to the armchair.
You going to ask me which one I think is right or real or true?
What I was actually going to ask you is a little different, but if you
Okay.
want to weigh in on that first, that would be interesting to hear.
I find it hard to believe that they didn't get along because they seem, I mean, what do I know? But that just seems a little odd. I feel like Will's reasoning is why I would think there wouldn't need to be a sequel. His story is complete. You can't do a fish out of water story again. What are you gonna do? Like, where are you gonna put him where he doesn't fit in? Because the charm of the first one was the heart of finding his father and the fish out of water, and he's gotten everything. So what can be the problem?
Him as a parent.
Oh, I guess so.
That would be kind of fun.
It would be, yeah.
He's been raised what he knows of his own childhood and how he was raised, and now that could be fun.
That could be fun.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I hadn't even actually thought about it. I just wrote it down as fact. But it makes me wonder.
Yeah.
It's been 21 years. Maybe Jon Favreau and Will Ferrell got along great back when they did it, but in the course of the past 20 years, as a sequel was discussed, maybe some disagreements arose at that point. Like,
about what the plot would be?
right. Or if I do it, I want this. Well, I don't think that's the way to go. I wouldn't want to do it that way. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah, it's like we talked about, I think it was our last episode, Home Alone. How many different ways are they going to forget the kid? Like how many different ways are you going to do this? I would rather personally see it as this standalone, timeless, than have a sequel not be as successful and kind of taint the lore of this film. I don't know. What do I know?
Well, that actually kind of leads into the question I actually was planning to ask you.
What's that?
When you have a beloved movie, it is very hard to follow up, whether that might be in a sequel or whether that might be in a musical version.
Yeah.
So we just said that some reviewers of the musical version are disappointed with a few things. It is opening night tonight for Mr. Sean Astin and the cast of Elf the Musical on Broadway.
Everybody stand and clap.
What do you think it takes for a new version of a beloved classic such as this musical version of, Elf on Broadway? What's it going to take for this particular run to make people go, yes, yes, yes. I love Elf, the movie. I'm a big fan. I've loved it for years, but I love this every bit as much.
I think it's going to take the casting. I think it's going to take the people, because you know the story. So if I had the ways and means, would I march myself up to New York City to watch Sean Astin play Santa Claus? Absolutely, I would, because I want to support Sean Astin and do whatever. Now, can you imagine if Will Ferrell did a limited run as Buddy the Elf in this? Right. You're just like, oh my gosh.
Right.
That's what y'all should do next year. Let me just say that the marketing team of Candy and Ashley say,
yes,
you should contact Will Ferrell and say, hey buddy. But no, I think it's the people. I think it's the charm and the dedication of the mix of the people that you have that draw the audiences in.
I was was thinking about how I would answer as I was driving in, and I came up with an answer very similar to what you said. You have to have something that makes it stand out, because it is a disadvantage, right? If I love Elf the movie that much, then by comparison, I'm going to be like, well, what happened to the Burp?
Yeah.
Well, he's not as much this way or that way or
Right.
whatever. I'm comparing, right? So unless you are doing something that's so special that I love it no matter what, or whatever you bring to it that's new and novel immediately grabs me, I do think it comes down to exactly what you said. For somebody to be able to say, I saw Elf on Broadway when Sean Astin was in it.
Yes.
I saw Hamilton when Lin-Manuel
Yes.
was still in it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, I mean, those are the types of things that
It's
people...
the names.
Yeah, something about it that just makes it so special that you feel like it wasn't just a production, which, I mean, I don't mean it... You know I love performances. I don't mean it like
absolutely.
just a production, but I mean like it elevates it.
Yeah.
Like now it is some kind of an experience and a lifetime memory.
A once-in-a-lifetime memory.
There, yes, right. Like, I mean, my example from a month or so ago, I was talking about seeing Karen Grassley in Shadowlands.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't really remember the play very much, but I will always remember I saw Ma Ingalls on stage doing
Did you
this
know
play.
that Jill, one of our friends and supporters, also saw that same?
Did she?
She went and saw her because she's like, I saw her in this. I was like, so did Candy. You guys could have been in the same audience. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about this. Just a brief point of clarification. I don't think that this issue necessarily applies to community theater. I think it's
yeah.
more this comparison of Broadway version versus this original beloved movie that
Right.
kind of sets it up for higher expectations, I
Right,
think.
it does. But even in the community theater casting, it is essential. Like our friend Keith, who was at the top of the show and did the commercial for us, he has a really high standing in our community. He's beloved in our community. And I mean, Will Ferrell's shoes are pretty big elf shoes to fill, but he did a wonderful
did.
job.
He did a great job.
And it made people want to come back, not only to support him, like we were talking about, if I could go to see Sean Astin, I would, but people who were like, I want to go see Keith play Buddy, and they did.
That is an
And,
excellent point.
You know, it's all in casting.
So much in casting and talent.
Absolutely. He had both.
Absolutely. Well, I think that brings us to the end, Ashley. And I'm going to let you call it
Oh my
because I
goodness.
bet I can predict who you're going to cheers.
Well, I can't pick Sean Astin just because, you know, I mean, I'm going to cheer Sean Astin whenever he comes up. So that's like honorary cheers, Sean. But I think Will Ferrell
Right.
deserves
100%.
the toast to today. And it's Christmas Eve, Candy.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
That makes me smile.
And smiling is our favorite.
Cheers.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music, Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.